Letha Whitworth is my own aunt.
There are pieces of it written on the walls, pieces of it tucked up in the attic, unseen for decades.
There's stuff up here.
Is there?
It's empty, whatever it is. That vase right there or something.
And there are pieces of history buried beneath the floorboards.
But it's all intact.
You want me to send it up?
Looks like a medicine bottle.
But anyone who's been around the town of Dowling for a while will tell you there is more history, maybe an important piece of American history, down below this 150-year-old Berry County building, the old Dowling Corner Store.
They found tunnels in under the floor.
There is a tunnel under our house, from our house under the highway to the store, and I was told that that was part of the slave trail to help free the slaves.
That story, the story of the Underground Railroad operating in Dowling, is something of a legend. Many in town trace this story back to Leona Moon Vandelik. She at one time owned both the store and the home across the street. Records show the same people oftentimes own both properties. Some say Leona used the tunnel herself.
And she would use it to get supplies back and forth, and it was safer than crossing the highway.
And Leona might have known why it was there in the first place. Her great niece, Donna Stanton, says she thinks Leona wrote about it in her journal. Stories from Leona's father and grandfather about helping the slaves. It's a journal Richard Avery has seen.
She was just a particular person in keeping track of everything that happened every day.
Richard used to own the corner store. He was always curious about the stories he heard from Leona.
Because I've been many times going to cut a hole in the floor and look myself. Yeah. Because I got a wild curiosity.
But he didn't get to satisfy that wild curiosity to look underneath that floor until he sold the store to new owners.
It's yours.
Thank you so much, Richard. Appreciate it. We're very excited.
We appreciate it, Richard. We won't let you down. We won't let you down, Richard.
Bruce and Sandy Campbell.
And we'd heard a few stories about some walls and tunnels and things, and as we got into it, we decided to take the whole floor up and look at the whole thing. And
what Bruce and Sandy found were some of the things you might expect to find in an old building.
It was pretty exciting. It was very neat to see the old bottles and artifacts that were down there.
But they found some things they did not expect. Meticulously cut stone walls that aren't part of the foundation. Tiny compartments surrounded by them.
I see no reason for this thing.
We went underground to look for ourselves. So these are some of those walls that we're talking about that don't seem to serve any purpose to support the foundation. There's kind of a squared-in area right here where some people think there might have been a hiding place or something along those lines. Would-be hiding places for fugitive slaves, steps away from that possible tunnel. Bruce thinks it might be beneath this deep stone wall that faces the house across the street. A tunnel on the other side, he says, could be the reason why water keeps coming in without coming down the walls. No sign yet of a tunnel on this end. What about that house, the one where Leona supposedly walked to and from underground? With Donna Stanton's permission, we went across the street to do some digging.
A big piece of metal.
It's enough of a legend to make a grown man dig.
Found lots of broken bottles, glasses, crock pots. We found partial lantern.
The legend that beneath the nearly 150-year-old Berry County store that Bruce Campbell and his wife Sandy now own is a tunnel leading to the house across the street. A tunnel, so the legend goes, that was built for the Underground Railroad, a would-be route for fugitive slaves through the town of Dowling on their way to freedom.
It'd be nice to think that you just had a touch of the past where something like that had happened.
And as we showed you Monday when Bruce tore up the floor of the old store to dig, he found some signs that that legend could be true.
You can see that wall has nothing sitting on it, does not support anything.
Walls that could have cordoned off hiding places for fugitive slaves.
There's the water again.
Bruce also found water coming into the basement, but only at the end of the building that faces the home. Water he thinks might be coming from the tunnel. But despite a little digging, there was no clear sign of that tunnel, so we took our search to the other end of it, across M37 to Donna Stanton's home. She says her great-aunt, Leona Moon Vandelik, used to use the tunnel to go to and from the home to the corner store, which she used to own.
They told me Aunt Leona in later years, when she was running the store, would go from the house to the store that way because it was easier for her to get back and forth.
At the front of the home, the part that faces the old corner store, there is a shallow crawl space. The floor is mostly clay and stone, except for this noticeably newer pile of dirt. So we think if there was a tunnel, that it's right underneath there.
Yeah.
And a little deeper,
Because there's no stones missing from the wall. Where'd these stones come from?
large stones you wouldn't just find in the ground. A beam sticking straight out of the ground. No clear sign of a tunnel, but small pieces of evidence that at some point, something here got filled in. For that last part of our trip, we brought local history buffs Jerry Lee Morton and Brian Reynolds along. So if there is a tunnel under M37, we asked, what could the tunnel have been built for?
That's a good question. And, you know, at the time, it would have been nothing more than a very narrow gravel road. It's not like there would have been a great deal of traffic.
As Brian said, why would you need a skywalk or a tunnel when you only have a few horses going by each day?
Leaving the Underground Railroad as a possibility. But timing is an issue. Records show the store was built in 1864, after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Were there still slaves in the North? Yes, there were. And would the Underground Railroad still have a function? Well, yes, the fact is it would.
I read a couple of histories, one saying that the Emancipation Proclamation, in effect, closed the Underground Railroad. I read another one more along the lines of what Brian is saying, that the Underground Railroad did go until about 1865, which would put, of course, the end of the Civil War, which again would put this kind of at the end of that.
But there is another possibility, and it's tied to the house across the street. It was built considerably earlier, likely in the 1840s. The land was often owned by the same people. And since the stone walls under the store are not part of the foundation, they could have been built before the store.
And I think you could infer from that that the tunnel was intended as an escape route.
That people would hide out underneath what is now this store.
Well, you know, at the time of the Underground Railroad, there were agents coming from the south to the north, trying to find the escaped slaves, trying to destroy the network that the Underground Railroad represented. And most of those places had some way, if the authorities showed up, there was an escape route some way for those people to get out of the house, and that tunnel would make perfect sense in that circumstance.
Also lending credence to the legend,
I haven't heard the name Heath as a druggist in Hastings.
medicine bottles found under the store. And remember Great Aunt Leona? Her grandfather, James, the one whose Underground Railroad activities may have been written in a journal, was said to be a doctor. And doctors participated in the Underground Railroad in larger numbers than the general public. There is, though, one more thing, the location.
That's also slightly north of the, probably the best known trail in this area, going from Schoolcraft, Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, Marshall, on to Detroit. It would be almost like a little spur, but I don't know why you would have it up, you know, maybe 8 or 10 miles north of Battle Creek. But it's almost like close to being Underground Railroad, but maybe not quite.
But I think it's still tantalizing enough to still wonder about it. So we don't just dismiss it totally.
Bruce Campbell isn't ready to dismiss it either.
No, there's more stuff to find down there. We've just covered a very little bit down there digging, and you can see we found a lot of bottles and things, and there's more down there. We're going to find it.
Gotta be one way or the other.